StudyJesus.com presents Bible Stories, where biblical stories of the ages come alive.
Jesus spent Monday night in Bethany again. On Tuesday morning, as they went again to Jerusalem, the disciples noticed that the fig tree they'd passed the day before was dried up from the roots and withered away. Peter said, "Master, see how quickly this fig tree has withered away?" Jesus said, "If you have faith in God, you can do greater things than that." But Jesus didn't want them to think that they could ask God to destroy anything just because they didn't like it. So he told them that when they prayed, to be sure and forgive all who had done them wrong, so that the Father in heaven might forgive them. And he then said, "But if you don't forgive, your Father in heaven will not forgive you." Continuing with our series on the life of Christ, this story from the Bible is titled Tuesday.
Precious memories.
StudyJesus.com presents Bible Stories with your host, Dr. Joe Jackson. Stories directly from God's holy word, told in easy-to-understand story form that the whole family will enjoy, and featuring the work of a talented artist illustrating each week's story. Now gather the family because it's time for this week's Bible story.
As soon as they arrived in Jerusalem, Jesus went into the temple. And as he was walking through the courts, some of the children of Israel came to him and asked, "What right do you have to come here and do these things? And who gave you the right?" They meant such things as cleansing the temple and teaching there. Jesus said, "You answer my question, and I'll answer yours. And here's my question. Was the baptism of John from heaven or of men?" This means, was John the Baptist really a prophet of God, or did he just pretend to be one when he really wasn't? The Pharisees didn't know how to answer this question. For if we say he was from heaven, he will say, "Why then didn't you believe him?" But if we say he was from men, we fear the people, for everyone thinks that John was surely a prophet. So they answered Jesus, "We can't tell." And Jesus then said, "Neither will I tell you who gave me the right to do these things." A certain man had 2 sons, and he said to the first, "Go now and work today in my vineyard." The son answered, "I will not." But afterwards he repented and went. The father went to the second son and said the same thing, "Go work today in my vineyard." This son answered, "I'm going, sir." But he didn't go. Now, which of these sons best pleased the father? They answered, "The first." Jesus said, "The publicans and sinners are like that son, and they'll enter the kingdom of heaven before you do. For John came to tell you what you needed to do, and you didn't believe him, and you didn't do what he told you to do. The publicans and sinners did believe him. You didn't repent, but they repented." And then Jesus told them another parable. There was a certain man who planted a vineyard, and he put a hedge or fence around it. And then he made a place where the grapes could be made into wine, and built a tower where the workmen could stay to guard it. Everything was done to make it safe and to make the work easy. He then rented it to men who were to take care of it, and he himself went into a far country. And when it was time for the fruit to be ready, he sent his servants to get what belonged to him. But these men who had rented the vineyard hadn't worked, and they didn't have any fruit to give. They took the servants and beat one and killed another and stoned another. The owner then sent other servants to look after things, and they were treated just as badly as the first. Last of all, he sent his son, saying, surely they'll respect my son. But when these men saw the son coming, they said among themselves, now here's the son. Sometime he's going to own this vineyard. Let's kill him and take it for ourselves. And they caught the son and killed him and threw his body out of the vineyard. Jesus said, now what will the owner of the vineyard do to these wicked men? The scribes answered, he will destroy them and rent his vineyard to other men who will do better. Jesus said, that's what God will do to you, for he's the Lord of the vineyard, and you're his servants, and you're planning to kill his son. Jesus then told another parable. A king made a feast when his son was married, and he invited a great many guests. And when the dinner was ready, he sent his servants to tell those who were invited to come to the feast, but they wouldn't come. He sent still other servants to tell them that everything was ready and it's time for them to be there. But the guests paid no attention. One went to his farm and another to his shop. But some treated the servants very roughly, and some of the servants at last were killed. The king heard of this, and he was so angry that he sent his armies to kill these murderers and burn their city. And then he said to other servants, the wedding feast is ready, but the guests who were invited were not worthy to eat it. I want you to go out into the streets and call in everyone you meet. And this the servants did, bringing in the good and the bad. At the door, everyone was given a robe which he was asked to wear during the feast. When the king went in to see the guests, he found one man who wouldn't take the robe that was offered to him, and he was there just in his old clothes. The king said, friend, how did you come here without a wedding robe? The man said nothing, for he had no excuse. And then the king said to his servants, tie him hand and foot, and take him away and punish him. The scribes and Pharisees knew that in all these parables, Jesus meant to show them how unworthy they were. They badly wanted to put their hands on Jesus, but they were afraid to touch him because so many people there were his friends. So they went out to think of some questions that they could ask him, which they thought might lead him into trouble. But Jesus answered all of them. Before long, the scribes and Pharisees sent some other men to Jesus. These men pretended to be friendly, and they said to Jesus, Master, we know that you're truly good, and you'll answer every question in the way that pleases God, whether it pleases men or not. So we want to ask you this question. Is it right to pay taxes to the Roman emperor or not? Shall we pay them or shall we not pay them? They spoke kindly, but Jesus was not deceived. He knew that although they seemed friendly, their hearts were full of hatred. He also knew why they asked that question. They didn't see how Jesus could possibly answer it without making enemies. If he said, no, don't pay the taxes, they could turn him over to the Romans to be punished. And if he said, yes, you ought to pay them, he would certainly displease most of the children of Israel who paid to pay the taxes. And Jesus said, why do you tempt me? Bring me a penny. And then after they'd given him a penny, Jesus asked, "Now whose face and title are there on this penny?" They said, "Caesar's." And then Jesus said, "Give to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and give to God the things that are God's." After this very wise answer, they left Jesus and went away, trying to think of some other question to ask. And they tried one after another, but the answers of Jesus were all given in such a way that they couldn't find any fault with any of his answers. It seems strange to us that the very ones who were looking so eagerly for their king should be so unwilling to accept him when he came. But they forgot or ignored the fact that their king was to be poor and humble. They thought of him only as a great soldier. It was only a little earlier on this very same day that Jesus reminded them of an old story they all knew. When Solomon was building this great temple, the workmen came across one stone that was so unusual in shape that after trying it in a lot of different places, they finally decided that it was a mistake and they just threw it away. But when the great work of building the temple was almost done, the most important stone was missing. After a long time hunting for it, they finally found the one that they'd thrown away. They tried it, and they found that it fitted. They knew what Jesus meant. They had treated Jesus as worthless, but they would find that he was the Christ, the Son of God, and their great judge. When Jesus was asked, "What is the greatest commandment of all?" he answered, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. And the second is like it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself." This was a wonderful answer, because if we do these things, we shall never break any of the commandments. If we love God with all our heart, we'll never want to worship idols or take God's name in vain or miss worshiping him. And if we love all those around us as well as we love ourselves, we'll never want to do anything to hurt people or even to make anybody uncomfortable. And then Jesus turned to the Pharisees and asked them this question: "What do you think of the Christ? Who is he?" And they answered, "The Son of David." And Jesus then said, "How can he be the Son of David? For David himself called him his Lord." No one was able to answer, nor did anyone dare to ask him any more questions. Jesus turned to his disciples and to the people who crowded around him, and he said to them, "The scribes and the Pharisees teach you the law of Moses, and that you must obey. But don't follow their actions. They teach, but they don't themselves do as they teach. They lay heavy burdens on other men's shoulders, but they themselves won't carry them. They do all their deeds just to be seen by men." And then Jesus told those wicked scribes and Pharisees what he knew about them, that instead of being good teachers for the people, they did them harm, actually. That although they made a great show of loving God, their hearts were very wicked. Jesus was always loving and kind even to wicked people, if they were sorry for their sins and were ready to try and do better. But Jesus spoke very hard words to these hypocrites, words that they could never forget, words that have shown all the people in the world who've read this story how deceitful these men actually were. And it made them very angry. The fact that they were angry shows that they really were not sorry for their sins. For if they'd been willing to become better men, they would have been grateful to Jesus for showing them that they needed forgiveness and for showing them the way to receive it. Their anger would have left them as they thought over their lives, and they would have come to Jesus to be forgiven and wouldn't have tried to kill him for telling them the truth. Jesus then went out of the temple, and as he passed through the court of the women, he saw the people putting gifts of money into the boxes which were kept there for that purpose. Everyone was expected to give as much as he could, and there were many who were able to put in a large sum of money. But as Jesus passed the box, a very poor woman put in 2 mites. Now, we have no money as small as a mite today. The 2 mites were just a very, very small amount of money and made a very, very small gift. But Jesus said to his disciples, "Truly, this poor widow has done more than anyone else here. For though the rich have given more money than she has, they still have plenty left, while she gave all she had." And this teaches us that if we give away only what we don't need, it's not being really generous at all, and Jesus won't be greatly pleased with our gift. It's the giving until we have to go without something we would really like to have that makes us really generous. And it's this kind of giving that Jesus loves and rewards with his blessing. A great many people think that those who give huge sums of money ought to be thanked and praised, but that those who only give a little are not worthy of praise. But it's not the largeness of the gift, but the love that prompts it that ought to be measured. Even a child can give a gift with a great deal of love in it. Lord willing, next time we'll conclude this story on the life of Christ titled Tuesday.
Sent from somewhere to my soul.